Hello. I hope you're doing well today. I have been recently breaking down the new tax law that was passed on July 2nd, 2025, called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. I'm going to refer to it as the B3. There's a lot of implications. It's sweeping legislation. There's a lot of things in the Trump administration that are noisy and flooding the zone and also temporary and probably going to be overturned. But this piece of legislation, this is really where to focus your attention because this is law. This is actually going to stick, unlike a lot of other stuff. So I've been spending my time really digging into this law and doing my best to bring it to you, what matters to you as a young, self-employed person making your way in the world. So I started with an episode that is an overview of what is in the B3. And what I'm doing now is each week I am just breaking down this tax law into bite-sized chunks. I'm trying to keep everything under 20 minutes, and it's by subject so that you can go back through and you can find the info you need about, for example, buying a new car or student loans. So please go back into the show notes if you want to reference the overview again, or if you want to check out a single issue or send an episode to a friend. I'm always grateful for that, and I hope that it helps you and your friends. Check the show notes because I'm linking in the show notes to all of these episodes about the B3, the big, beautiful bill, which I don't think is beautiful. All right. So today on the podcast, I want to talk to you about the implications in the new bill for student loans. I will admit to you right up front, I am not a student loan expert, and there are some really difficult, tricky things you want to look out for. So be very cautious taking action here. I want to give you the landscape, and then I'm going to point you to some resources for when you're ready to actually take the action. Okay, so there are reporters out there doing interviews and, getting on the horn to the Department of Education. And so there are some good resources. I will link them all in the show notes that I want you to use to follow up and to take action. Oh, and I want to shout out those reporters, by the way, because I really appreciate their very good work. So Tara Siegel Bernard from the New York Times has been doing some really great writing on student loan issues. And I'm linking in the show notes to an article she wrote that is sort of a clearinghouse what to do article about your student loans. Also, Corey Turner of NPR has a great article that I will link to in the show notes as well, with a great breakdown, especially of the new payment plans. All right, so let's jump in. First, I want to just talk to you about the quick facts. So for new borrowers with loans taken out after July 2026, so a year from the date of me recording this, the B3 cuts the 7 existing repayment plans down to just 2 plans, okay? So if you're a new borrower after July 2026, you will only have 2 options, okay? The 2 plans are a standard plan and an income-driven plan, okay? Also, something you need to know, President Biden's SAVE program, which was very generous, which I've done a lot of education and prior podcasts and videos in my program, Money Bootcamp, about that SAVE program. It's very generous, but it is ending. You can basically consider it dying. It's on life support now, but it's about to die. There are new lifetime caps on borrowing for education that kick in July 1st, 2026. So this is an important thing to know if you are planning to go to college, go to graduate school, or if you have a kiddo going to college or graduate school. All right, let's talk about the impacts. Just real quick, some impacts from these changes. 500,000 current borrowers could see their payments spike. Most of the existing repayment plans have been scrapped, so there's going to be some things to navigate now. There are about 7.7 million borrowers currently in legal limbo because of those lawsuits and the SAVE plan being tied up in the courts right now. If you are in that position, my condolences. That is the trickiest group of people. That is the trickiest position to be in. And I definitely want you to check out that article in the New York Times by Tara Siegel Bernard that I'm linking to in the show notes, because she has some great information about what you should do if you are one of those 7.7 million borrowers. All right. Interest, well, while there has been this legal limbo and interest was stopped temporarily, this new bill allows the interest on those loans, those people in limbo. Interest has begun accruing starting August 1st, right? So already you've got interest accruing, even if you have those loans, even if they're in forbearance, the interest is now accruing again as of August 1st. Okay. Another impact, it's going to be harder for low and middle income students to attend pricier graduate school programs now. I'll get into the details of that, but that is a big impact I want you to be aware of. All right, so let's jump in. I'm breaking this up by categories. This is not going to be a long episode today, but the categories are new caps on borrowing for student loans. Then I'm going to talk about student loan repayment plan changes. And then I'm going to talk about legacy borrowers. If you already have student loans, what you may need to think about. All right, so student loans, new caps on borrowing. Nothing has changed in the borrowing limits if you are an undergrad, if you are one yourself. However, Parent Plus borrowers are now limited to a total of $65,000 per child for undergraduate education. So that $65,000 is spread across all 4 years. That is a total cap, not an annual cap. All right. That's for Parent Plus borrowers. There are new lifetime caps on borrowing for new borrowers on loans that are taken out after July 2026. So this includes some big, surprising changes to graduate student loan borrowing, all right? There is now a new $100,000 lifetime borrowing limit for graduate education. That is down from the prior limit of $138,500. There is a higher cap for professional degrees, okay? So if you're going into law or medicine specifically, there is a total cap of $200,000, okay? So double. And that is $50,000 per year is your cap for a total of $200,000. Now, you used to be allowed to borrow up to the full cost of the program you were attending. This is not true anymore. Okay, the law sets a new lifetime limit for undergrad and graduate loans combined at $257,500 per person. Okay, so the federal government will now no longer loan you over that amount in total for your education. All right, student loan repayment plan changes. Let's talk about that. The B3, the One Big Beautiful Bill, has cut down the previous 7 repayment plans down to just 2 plans, okay? There's a standard plan and there is an income-driven payment plan. Let's talk about the standard plan. So borrowers will pay back their loans on set timelines between 10 and 25 years, depending on your loan amount, okay? Just to give you an example, if you owe under $25,000, you'll be paying back on a 10-year timeline. And if you owe over $100,000, you'll be paying back on a 25-year timeline. And there's different, slices in between those two low and high amounts, okay? But it's a pretty rigid program. So it's just kind of like, this is what you got, cut and dried. Now, there's an additional program. It's more flexible. This is called the Repayment Assistance Program, the RAP. It's more flexible and it has repayment based on your adjusted gross income. That's a tax term, AGI. So it'll vary from $10 a month at a minimum for borrowers with an AGI under $10,000, up to 10% of your AGI for borrowers with $100,000 or more of income. Okay. So again, this is a little bit more rigid. One big change is that, if you had under $10,000 of income under previous plans, you didn't need to make any payment at all. This now requires you to make a $10 payment per month. This could be a good thing because it kind of keeps you in touch with your loan. You're looking at it every month. It could be a bad thing because if you're making under $10,000, you probably need every dollar that you have. So some more details. Current borrowers will have access to the RAP plan. So if you want to get on that, you may. And it may result, the RAP plan, the RAP plan may result in lower payments for middle-class borrowers, but it's not as generous as the Biden-era SAVE plan, okay? The RAP waives interest after your monthly payment, so your debt balance does not grow. This is really positive. So one of the pretty bad flaws of prior plans, prior income-driven repayment plans, is that You might have a low monthly repayment amount, but the interest was still allowed to accrue, and actually your loan balance could be increasing because of that. So you're not actually making any dent with your payments. Your loan was actually growing. So that is not going to happen with the RAP, and that's a good thing. FYI, this is also true of the SAVE plan, which is dying, but I'm glad that they continued this and saw this as a priority with the RAP. Also, RAP waives interest after your monthly payment, so your debt balance doesn't grow. Okay, so that's another good thing. I'm going to quote the article from Corey Turner of NPR because he has some really great information about this RAP situation. From Corey Turner, borrowers on RAP will also see their balances go down every month. The government will pitch in up to $50 to make sure lower income borrowers see their principal balances shrinks. For example, a borrower whose monthly payment makes only a $30 dent in their principal would see the government knocking off an extra $20 per month. Borrowers whose monthly payments already reduced their principal balance by at least $50 would get no extra help from the government. Okay, that's from Corey Turner. So this repayment plan basically drips out your loan forgiveness every single month that you make a payment instead of a huge payoff after 20 years, okay, which is how the old programs worked, all right? A big difference, though, with the RAP is that it ends after 360 payments or 30 years. This is a big lengthening of the timeline from the 20 years or 25 years of previous plans, okay? All right. Now, what to do if you have current student loans, right? Legacy borrowers on older plans. These are the people in the most difficult position, especially because the SAVE program is still in legal limbo. Frankly, the Department of Education, having had its staff cut by 50%, has a huge backlog right now. The website is not fully accurate or up to date. It does not have all the info you need. So you might be in a really difficult position, okay? So if you're a legacy borrower, you might qualify for an older plan called the Income-Based Repayment, IBR. Now, this plan is pretty safe and reliable, and the reason is that it was formed by an act of Congress, which makes it pretty safe legally. Okay, the IBR program gives you loan forgiveness after 20 or 25 years, depending on how old your loan is, okay? Now, I want to direct you, if you are in this boat, again, it's pretty complicated and you really want to be careful that you don't make a misstep. So I'm going to direct you to Tara Siegel Bernard's article in the New York Times for some really good information on navigating the confusing information on the Department of Education website currently, how to find the information she tells you, and basically just how to triage your current student loan situation. So check out the show notes for that, which I think is a really, really helpful article. All right, I hope this overview of the student loan changes has been helpful for you. I know it's not completely wonderful news, but some of it is not bad. So go forward, share this episode with a friend if you have friends with student loans. I hope that this will help you and anyone you know and love who's got student loans and is trying to figure out what their next steps are. And please remember to make use of the show notes and click all those links and find those articles that are also directing you to trustworthy sources who have great information to help you navigate it. All right. Thank you so much for sharing this episode, and I will see you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps. I'm so grateful. My tax guide, Taxes for Humans, is available for pre-order at sunlighttax.com/book. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.